Who are we?
Jews Against Genocide.
Who are we?
Jews Against Genocide.
Who are we?
Jews Against Genocide.
We've got a few people who are hanging around and interested in what we're doing, and I'm sure security also would like to know. So we're Jews Against Genocide, and we are wholly opposed to Israel's genocide which it's committing against the Palestinians, wholly against the siege of Gaza with the blockade of food and water and medical supplies for 8 weeks just about now. The World Health Programme has stopped distributing food because they've run out of it. And now there's real starvation beginning in Gaza. There's been a large number of children died of starvation, and those numbers will increase exponentially if this blockade is continued. So we're here as Jews to protest about this, to say avowedly what is happening is not in our name at all. We are wholly opposed to what is happening to the Palestinians, and we think there should be a permanent ceasefire and there should be a peace arrangement whereby the Palestinians can rebuild their civil society. If there's anyone else who'd like to say something, please go ahead. I apologise for not having a loudspeaker system.
Can I speak? Can I speak?
You are a loudspeaker.
I want to speak. I'm 93 years old and I am horrified, remembering in my ignorance how I went to Israel in my early 20s on a Lambretta, but already then I saw how Israel, that is Zionism, how it was treating Israeli Arabs way back in the 1950s. We're appalled at what is happening right now in Gaza, but as the Secretary General of the United Nations said, what happened on October the 7th did not happen in a vacuum.
No.
It happened after over 70 years or more of appalling abuses and violence against the people, the Palestinians, who'd lived in their villages and towns for centuries. And now we're here living in the UK with a government that supports military Zionism. Starmer, our Prime Minister, has blood on his hands. He's still arming Israel. He's still speaking about Israel's right to defend itself when over nearly 60,000 people have been killed. 70% of them are innocent women and children. Children are starving. There are many children we don't even know who their parents are, who have lost all their limbs. This is unbelievable that it goes on. Yes, all the aid has stopped. The World Food Programme has run out of flour. There's no bread, there's no water. But people are dying not just from starvation, because there's no medical help. The hospitals, they keep bombing hospitals. The only the real publicity we got was not about the people, the Palestinians being killed. It was really when those aid workers, ambulances, and the lies that Israel told when all those paramedics and doctors were killed. And they're still lying about that. But the silence in this country is something terrible.
Yes.
We are complicit in the genocide. This country is complicit as long as it continues to arm Israel as long as it continues to be silent. I am horrified, and we must do all we can to keep this protest up. And what is the BBC about? Its so-called impartiality. No, it's not impartial. It's utterly and totally biased and prejudiced. It's in favor of Israel. It wants to silence anyone who talks about the terrible genocide that is going on in Gaza and now on the West Bank as well. And look what Israel is doing. It's apartheid, it's colonialism, it's also invading Lebanon. It wants to expand, it wants to take over the whole region, and we are silent. I am so upset. I am so angry. I am sleepless with anger that this is the sort of government that I have, and I would like to see Keir Starmer prosecuted as well as Netanyahu.
Yes.
It's also much more serious, even what happened with the police stopping this demonstration outside the BBC, because it's the politicization of our police force. And the police are under the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and they're also under Yvette Cooper, our Home Secretary. But our police are under orders of our government. And I can make an analogy, because at the same time, this is not about the genocide in Gaza. There's another genocide that no one is talking about, which I'm very involved in, which is Turkey's genocide against the Kurds in Syria. And our police, at the end of November last year, our police, in the middle of the night, raided the Kurdish community centre, arrested a whole lot of people who won't be prosecuted till next year, charging them with terrorism. Not one of them was a member of the PKK. But that raid happened 2 days after David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, had met with the Turkish Foreign Secretary. And David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, is in cahoots with the Israeli ambassador here and with people who have come here. We've seen, I'm astonished that Netanyahu hasn't actually turned up. And if he does, we must all turn up like mad to make a citizen's arrest on the basis of universal jurisdiction. But I just wanted to say that it goes even beyond that. It's to do with the way our very police force, our metropolitan police force, are now being politicized by our government. Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to put the statistics in some sort of perspective. Someone did a statistical analysis the other day. If the same number of deaths per head of the population in Gaza is translated into the number of the population in America, it would be over 8.25 million deaths. It would be the equivalent of 4 9/11s every day for the 18 months of this genocide. So we're here to call the BBC to account, because particularly BBC TV News is not reporting the genocide that is taking place. And as Margaret said, it is a violation of its responsibilities. All that BBC Verify is doing is to verify its complicity in this genocide, because by not reporting it, it is keeping the British population in ignorance of what's happening, and therefore is minimising the pressure that the population would put on the government to take action. So we're here, particularly about outside the BBC, to make this point as strongly as we can.
BBC stands for
British brainwashing corporation. Make no mistake, that is exactly what is going on here, even to the journalists within it. They are being shut up, shut down, and it's got to stop.
And, sorry to say, they're using us as a cover for it.
Yes.
They're fighting anti-Semitism, so they're using us to justify it all. I think the most shocking thing that Margaret reminded me of when you talked about this happening long in advance of October the 7th and on the West Bank and the occupied territories was Jews carrying out pogroms, Hawara, Jews carrying out pogroms against local populations. It just made me so ashamed.
If you speak slowly, we'll repeat it. If you speak sentence by sentence, we'll shout it out for you.
Oh, sorry, thanks. I
Right,
can't
speak
think of
up.
anything. Well, can I say one other thing that
Can I say one other thing?
Right. This just
Loudly.
reminds me of.
This reminds me of.
We talk about Jews feeling Israel is their homeland,
We talk about Jews feeling Israel is their homeland.
but I remember my mother, when she talked of the Heimat, the home, in Yiddish, she was referring to Poland, not...
Because I remember my mother, when she was talking about her homeland, she was talking about Poland,
Yeah, not Israel.
not Israel.
Poland was the home.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, just some more about the BBC, why we decided to protest outside the BBC. Obviously, we want to highlight the BBC's complicity, but this has been attempted before. Back in January the 18th, there was supposed to be a march that started from the BBC, and then a very short notice, the police informed us that we could not march there because we'd be upset because we might disturb a synagogue. Now the synagogue's a few streets away, and the march was never going to go past the synagogue, and it never has. When asked if there's been any problems at the synagogue from marchers, there was no response. So this is what Michelle was saying about Jews being used as cover. And on that particular day, we ended up not being able to march, and actually one policeman did let a few people through to lay flowers on the BBC, and then some of them were violently arrested by the police. One of them was Chris Nyland, the chief steward of Stop the War Coalition. Other people were violently arrested, and afterwards Jeremy Corbyn, John MacDonald, and Judith Stevenson, and
Stephen Kapos.
and Steve. I was just going to say, and Stephen Kaposh, 87-year-old Holocaust survivor, was summoned to be questioned by the police.
Under the Prevention of Terrorism laws.
Apparently under the Prevention of Terrorism
Takes away your
laws.
rights.
So it seems to me that the police are protecting the BBC, helping to stifle protest. There was another occasion, I can't remember if it was February or not, I was prepared to come along to a static protest outside the BBC, and at the last minute the police told us we couldn't. So we ended up going to Parliament Square to watch Dan climb Big Ben. As I got there myself and lots of other people, the police had blocked all the roads, so we ended up having to go to Downing Street. So once again, it seems to be that the police are protecting the BBC. Now, the BBC up to a point does report, but it's very watered down reporting, very wish-washy. It's what they don't say more than what they do say. But then when they do say something, they use language which makes people a bit dismissive of it. So whereas they humanise the hostages, tell you their names and everything, Palestinians tend to be just numbers. And they'll say one Israeli got murdered, but then they'll say 50 Palestinians died. And then I also give that the BBC usually gives the final word to the Israeli embassy. But the Israeli embassy says this, or the IDF says this, and it's never questioned. Even, I think, when they were really caught out, when 15 medics got assassinated, I think they probably were giving the last word to the IDF. I think that in the end they've been proved wrong. But the way they portray it, they're portraying Israelis as more important, and they're also portraying the Israeli voice as the truth. Now, tying along with this, they never hesitate to say the Hamas health industry has said. So that puts into people's minds a bit of doubt. Oh, well, Hamas said must be lies. And of course, they always have to say Hamas designated a terrorist organisation by the UK, because apparently they were told to say that, because when the BBC weren't saying that, they were getting into trouble. So for ordinary Joe Boggs watching it, they're not going to realise what's the seriousness of what's going on. And not just that, you'll get people saying, oh well, both sides are as bad as each other. And this is the other thing, they call it a war, they call it a conflict, but it isn't. It's a genocide. You wouldn't say that the Jews were at war with the Germans, would you now? I mean, you wouldn't say that the Jews in the Holocaust were at war with the Nazis. It's more or less the same. That attack on October the 7th was used as an excuse for Israel to enact its final solution. I'm sorry to use those words, but it is Israel's final solution. I knew this was going to happen. They just want to clear the whole area. And also, let's not forget that some of those Israelis, quite a lot of those Israelis probably, were killed by the IDF under the Hannibal Directive because they didn't want hostages to be taken. Is the UK government arming Israel? They're sending spy planes over. So they're actually locating people to kill. This is what the British are doing.
There's another point that should be made. It's obvious to us in this group, but might not be obvious to others, that of course we have a very different point of view to that of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, which purports to speak and purports to represent all the Jews in the UK, but in fact does nothing of the sort. It only represents 20% of the deputies sent by synagogues. It's a minority view amongst the Jewish population in this country, and as we can see from the news recently with the 36 members of the board who signed a letter to the Financial Times criticising the BOD's support, uncritical support for Israel. The Jewish community is split and has many voices, and we are one of those voices. There are a number of different Jewish organisations: Jews for Justice for Palestinians, Jewish Voice for Labour, Jewish Network for Palestine, Jewish Socialist Group, Namod, and a number of others. We formed the Jewish Bloc on the Palestine Solidarity Campaign national demonstrations. We bring out somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people on those demonstrations, and no way can you say that the Jewish communities here are represented by the Board of Deputies. They represent an establishment position that supports Israel without criticism at all of this genocide and supports the government Starmer's position. So it's a lie that there is one point of view held by Jews in this country. And actually, that false narrative that all Jews support what Israel is doing, when the majority of the nations of the United Nations are fiercely critical of what Israel is doing, allies that false analogy, allies us with what Israel is doing, and therefore feeds into anti-Semitism. And that is a really disastrous occurrence, and that is what we're wholly opposed to.
One more point about the BBC, which is another reason why we're here. They never show us, never. I've been involved in Palestine on and off since 2002. I have never known the BBC to show Jews who are critical of Israel, maybe in passing, and I think they're doing it even less so. We never have our representatives on question time, but every march, well, they don't report every march, but when they do, they never ever show the Jewish bloc. And I've made a few complaints about this, and they've said, oh, well, we do show Jews, but rubbish, they won't. They want to keep it polarised, Jews and black and white. Jews support Israel, Palestinians and Muslims support Palestine. And I could go into detail about the BBC, but I'll be going off at a tangent because I've had personal experience of this with an event I put on.
We are Jews Against Genocide. Could we say that?
We did.
Yeah.
Say it again.
We are Jews Against Genocide. We are Jews Against Genocide. We are Jews Against Genocide.
We are the Jews who won't be silenced. We are the Jews who speak out against the bombing. Stop the bombing now, now, now.
1. We are the people. 2.
We won't be silent.
3.
Stop the bombing now, 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 now.
1.
We are the people.
2.
We won't be silent.
3.
Stop the bombing now, 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 now.
As we're standing outside the BBC, I'd like to pay tribute to the thousands of brave Palestinian journalists who've been murdered reporting the truth from Gaza and the West Bank. Their stories sing on in film, etc., and is another reason with their death, although more people are coming to take their place, why the real truth gets neutered and filtered out. But I think it's so important to remember those very brave journalists.
And also let us remember, again, silence about that, in spite of the horrendous indoctrination inside Israel and the way that most of the nation have no access to independent information. There are many, many incredibly brave reservists who refuse to serve, who've gone into prison, who are doing everything that they can to actually oppose their terrible government. And I think we need to remember them and pray for their survival in the hands of this appalling, disgusting, atrocious and brutal regime.
When we say genocide is taking place in Palestine, this is not a word that trips off our tongues. All of us Jews grew up knowing about, hating and fearing genocide. We thought after the Second World War that it would never happen again, and it has happened time after time. The genocide in Gaza can be seen nightly on the television, it can be seen on social media. Genocide is indiscriminate killing. Nick Maynard, a doctor from Oxford, he's been regularly going to Gaza. He loves Gaza. He loves the Gazan people. He's been going for years. He stood in May 2023 watching bombing in Gaza. Bombing in Gaza in May 2023 could take out one car. It could take out a room in a building. Bombing after October 2023 took out whole schools, whole hospitals, whole housing blocks. This level of indiscriminate killing cannot be described in any other way. It is genocide, and it has to be called genocide by our public broadcaster, by our government. Genocide is a crime. We're in danger now of giving up the hard-fought gain of having an international court of justice, of having an international criminal court, because even our own government, despite their weak words in support, care nothing for international law. This is a crisis of humanity when we give up the idea of an international order. Call it what it is. Genocide is happening in Palestine. Who are we? We are Jews against genocide. We call on the BBC to reinstate the film Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. A brilliant film which happened to have one presenter who is the son of a civil servant in a ministry of in Gaza. Now, if anybody looked into that film, they would actually find it was full of criticism of Hamas. This is the weakness of the BBC. They respond to demands to stop showing what was a really good, informative film. And they stop showing it, and they don't even look at it themselves. It was a film without bias. It was a film which in fact underplayed the destruction that's going on, and yet they still banned it. This is a weak corporation responding to political pressure, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
The head of news is apparently a Zionist, and I think that's one of the main problems of the BBC. One of the main problems. I've forgotten his name.
Can I say something that makes the BBC it obvious to the British public that there's something wrong, and that is the comparison between the coverage of Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine on weak historical basis, a more a mythic basis, and the invasion and takeover of the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, and now bits of Syria. I think the British public can see the difference in the presentation, and doesn't know what to make of it. So I asked the BBC to compare their coverage of Ukraine and their coverage of Palestine.
This is actually the case that over 70% of the population have wanted a ceasefire almost from the beginning. Yes. And the BBC is flying in the face of that, particularly the BBC TV News. And that's what we're here to criticise them for.
I think can I just say that I think we're being almost generous by always talking about complicity. I don't think it is complicit. I think we are participants in what's going on in Gaza and in Palestine. And, to have the mainstream media continually, refusing to report the absolute facts. We're not talking about, being neutral. You just report the facts, and that is genocide. So it's just such a disgrace, and we have to continue calling out. But we also have to say, it's not just not in our name, it's not in the name of humanity that anyone can be supporting what's happening in Gaza.
There are rumblings in the BBC itself from the journalists, actually. There are journalists who are being shut down. They are being shut up, shut down, pulled from programmes, and this is another area that people need to look at. The journalists are trying to speak up and speak out, but they are being shut up and shut down. Their programmes are being pulled. We must stop all that. We're paying for the British brainwashing corporation.
There are several people here who are descendants of Holocaust survivors, and certainly one of them, myself, has been looking at the coverage this week of the Yom HaShoah commemorations. It's Israel and the Jewish community's Holocaust Remembrance Day this week on Wednesday and Thursday, and outside the Houses of Parliament there was a commemoration there, which unfortunately invited the Israeli ambassador, Tzipi Hotovely, to this event. And the most shocking thing I heard at that commemoration, much of which was of course totally valid, it's very good that there is a commemoration for the suffering in the Holocaust, but to pollute such a commemoration by inviting Hotovely, I think was a horrible mistake. But she did say something I think the BBC should have reported. It didn't, of course, as far as I know, which is that she thanked at this event, at a Holocaust Remembrance event, she thanked the British government for supporting Israel at a time when Israel is committing a genocide. She used a genocide commemoration to thank Britain for supporting her genocide, in effect. She didn't use those words. That's how obscene and insane it is. If you can think it's that insane. Again, not reported by the BBC or any other coverage, but I don't know Hebrew, but I was able to look at coverage on YouTube of what Benjamin Netanyahu said at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Israel, on Yom HaShoah on Wednesday night. And what he said, I mean, even I can't quite believe it. Not only did he go into some detail about the horrors of the Holocaust in Hungary, because he'd been to hang out with Orban recently, and the people being shot and thrown into the river and such like. Well, okay, that stuff you can talk about at the Holocaust Memorial. He then boasted at the fact that last Yom HaShoah, in early May, that was when the Rafah offensive started, and he boasted about how that glorious offensive had then led to victories in Lebanon against the Hamas leadership, against killing Nasrallah, overturning Syria, bombing Iran, and how the whole Middle East had been turned upside down because of his offensive that he'd started on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, a year ago. This is the mentality of the present Israeli government. It's absolutely monstrous to use the memory of the Holocaust, to use Holocaust commemorations as excuses to justify, as arguments for committing what is clearly a genocide in Gaza. It couldn't be more obscene. Well, it could be more obscene because he then went on to say that the West must support his war against Iran, because if the Muslim zealots take over the West, then it's the end of the world. He's stirring up anti-Muslim racism in Europe. That's his plan. This is how monstrous this regime in Israel has become, and our British government, in the words of our ambassador, is supporting this monstrosity. It couldn't be worse. And as someone of a Jewish background, whose father was in Buchenwald and other camps and elsewhere, and the rest of the family were killed off, it is absolutely, we have no choice, as all of us here have no choice but to speak out about the way the world is going at the moment. It's absolutely terrifying, and the British people, unfortunately, your government is at the core, is at the centre of this. Keir Starmer is at the centre of this. I'm not quite sure how he got himself into this position, but he's at the centre of this horror. And actually that gives the British people and British politicians real power. If he backed down from this and stood up against it and led other European powers, this genocide, it simply would have to stop. And the fact that he doesn't do it shows he's utterly complicit. And we're going to end on this thing. Check out the Crispin Flintoff show tomorrow, because Benji Schoendorf, who's Keir Starmer's former comrade when he was some kind of radical leftist when he was a very young man in the 80s, has done a statement on YouTube you might want to see, and he's calling on Keir, he realises it probably won't work, for the sake of your children and what they're going to think of you when they're grown up and they see what you've done. You have to stop this genocide now. You have to stop supporting the genocide. I doubt it'll work, but it was quite an emotive thing to see. You can see it on YouTube.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark.
Sorry, we'd like you to move back.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice.